Hello everyone, Joel Clark here, lead designer of Lone Wolf Fists, etc., etc. And I'm jumping in front of the camera today, not just for the patrons, which I normally do, but kind of for everybody. You see, I got sent a really thoughtful email today, and it was really touching and inspiring, and it, it it was such a delight to read, and it had such good stuff in it that I wanted to share it with you guys, and I wanted to answer the questions that it posed me because there's some questions in it that I think are really good questions to ask if you're thinking about getting into making a game of your own, like I'm doing. And I'm not going to claim some massive amount of success from what I'm doing, especially not physical success, but I am apparently making this happen. It's in a playtest format, and by all signs, as far as I can tell, we're going to go all the way to a Kickstarter and possibly further. So there's going to be a nice physical hardcover of this thing before too much longer. So, in the sense of I wanted to make a game, and I was passionate about it, and I did ultimately make it, I'm a pretty good guy to consult about this. So, without further ado, let me pull my window down here. I've got to kind of self-monitor to see if I look like a total moron on this. There we go. I was sent this by Ron Wise. He's actually a patron, a longtime patron, kind of a super fan of the game, and he thought enough of me to write me a very thoughtful email today. So here it is. Hey Joel, that's me. First off, I just want to say that Lone Wolf Fist is coming along great. Thanks, Ron. And although I am plagued by chronic inertia, yeah, I feel that, man. I'm going to get a domain done as per the playtest bootcamp. That's really great to hear. I hope it's not too challenging, and it would really help me out if you wanted to give me feedback on the process, because I'm currently I made the Demon City domain, or a Demon City domain, not Suicide Heaven, but a kind of more generic Demon City domain, and I'm working on a couple other ones too that I'm going to use in this playtest, and I've had a lot of thoughts with making it so far, so that's all going to get written up here in the not too distant future whenever my midterms are over. Like you, I've been into the TTRPG hobby for a good portion of my life, probably more than half. And it's probably my biggest passion. Well, it's certainly one of my biggest passions, too. It's up there really close to being a father and completing my degree in business administration, which is really fascinating, surprisingly. I don't know, let me see. I started gaming in tabletop role-playing games somewhere around 17 or 18. I'm 33 as of the time of this recording, so it's pretty close to half for me, too. Back then it was D20 Modern, Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition, and the old school Vampire the Masquerade. Those are the three that were kind of my gateway drug. So, just to give you guys some info on that. Seeing the work that you're doing with your first product is awe-inspiring. Is this my first... I guess that's my first product, isn't it? It's not my first game I've designed. I've actually designed 2 games before this, which I was so unhappy with that they never really saw the light of day. I might go back and mess with those again. The 2 being Strangers of the Night, which was going to be a non-combat sneaking game based on an old post by Ben Yahtzee Croshaw, where he was talking about a non-violent sneaky game, and I was going to do a board game with it, and it kind of morphed into a role-playing game, and then back into kind of a hybrid. That never really got to a stage of development where I was satisfied with it, although I did actually write it 2 entire times in 2 different ways. So that's a thing I do pretty consistently. Also, there was one called Saga of a Strange World, I want to call it. And that was kind of like a send-up of Conan and the sort of Hyperborean Age stuff. And it was based on my love of HeroScape and this idea I had with my friend Joe Torres, where you could make a game where the resolution system was success or failure, but you could change that to success or success and you die. So it had kind of a 3-pronged thing where you could choose how committed you wanted to be to something. And it wound up being kind of my version of like if Hero Quest and HeroScape and stuff like that, Hero Quest it was, had turned into a full-on role-playing game. This is a way it could have been developed, and I was actually pretty satisfied with it in some ways and dissatisfied in others. But I learned a lot from it. I also learned the value of playtesting from that experiment. So I actually did do 2 other games before this one, just for the record. Let's see. Also, I made a dungeon called The Fountain of the Green Lady, which you can still find on a couple of sites. So, it's a fun little thing. Let's see. Seeing the work you're doing with the first product is awe-inspiring. You've managed to take a system that has a lot of potential, but runs slow as molasses, and not only make it run with much greater elegance and efficiency, but it's great at reflecting the themes of your game. Well, thank you. As you point out there, I actually had a really good game to work with, and I've talked with both Jerry Skold and Eric Tim Breck, the main guys who were behind making Legends of the Wulin, and I've learned a lot from working with David Ramirez, who was a contributor to that and contributor to Weapons of the Gods. So I've not only been able to work with a really good system over the course of years, but I've also had the chance to talk to people that made it and really mine their brains for their genius. Sometimes that's been a little more intense than others, but really, yeah, Legends of the Wulin had a lot of potential, and I've said it before, and I'll say it till the day I die. The worst part of Legends of the Wulin is that there wasn't more Legends of the Wulin. So let's see. I do. And I really appreciate the compliment that I'm making it run more elegantly. I think that's one of those compliments that you like to get, because you can make it faster by just removing more of it. It's just less cumbersome that way. But making it elegant, where it holds together and is still satisfying in the same way while being faster, that's elegance, and that's a high compliment. I really appreciate that. I also appreciate it because I feel like I might have done that. I really feel like I'm pretty confident in the way it runs, and I'm more or less satisfied with it. It gets really high marks from playtesters and people that play it. It inspires a lot of passion from superfans like yourself. So I feel like I managed to rebottle that lightning a little bit. So I'm very happy with it so far. As far as reflecting the themes of the game, yeah, that took some thinking, and I don't know that I don't know if I mined that vein as deeply as I would have liked to. I may have to go back to the drawing board in a few places on that, because you're right, I do, and I actually learned to do that from, of all people, Zach Smith, who used to have, or AKA Zach Sabbath, who used to have a special thanks credit in the book. I was unfortunately I came to a point in my fandom of Zach, because I really do admire his work, and I really admire his thinking in role-playing games. He's a really revolutionary fellow and a very good designer, but he is got this terrible set of behaviors when it comes to interacting with people, his fans, his critics, and it's just the most odious kind of behavior, and it's consistent out of the guy. And I did not want to invite more of that persona into my games, because if he decided to lean on the stuff that I'm doing, then like it could bring in a lot of complication for me, because I don't want to deal with him the way he seems to need to be dealt with. I don't imagine I'm ever going to be on that dude's radar. He's a much bigger deal in the TTRPG community than I am. He's a much bigger deal beyond that than I am. The guy does all kinds of stuff. But in this little corner of the world, after really doing some soul searching, I had to remove his name from the special thanks, which is a pity. Because he really did inspire that particular element. And I encourage anyone who likes what I'm doing in Lone Wolf Fist, as far as like making the gameplay something that reflects the feeling of the setting and the universe and the I think you call it the themes of the game. That's a pretty good way of putting it. To go through his blog, D&D with Porn Stars, and read his writing on that. There's a lot of really good, insightful, creative posts there. So much like I've had to say several times with my divorce, let's keep the good parts. There's a lot of reasons that you break off a deeper relationship with someone, but there was also a reason you kept that relationship going. It's hard to do. It's a hard discipline to master, but I think it's important that we do keep the good parts. So I encourage you. I encourage you to go and read that blog. Also, another blog you should probably read is Justin Alexander's blog, The Alexandrian. A lot of the process stuff, a lot of the first principle process and how to make your game function as it goes to the table, all of that's Justin Alexander. He does a great job of breaking down how to do that, and he's got not only a lot of insight, but a lot of patience in a lot of articulation in explaining how it's done and why it's done the way it's done and how you can do something similar. So that's really high yield reading as far as going to read a blog. So yeah, the Alexandrian is another one I would definitely look into for that one. Let's see. Furthermore, you've maintained a steady momentum to where you actually have a playtext document. Now, you didn't say playtest, you said playtext with an X instead of an S. And I don't know if that's a typo, or if you intended to do that, but either way, I love it. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to start calling it a playtext. think that's cool. Um, that's a good point too. The whole steady momentum thing. Um, if I had to do this game over again, I would reduce the scope enormously. I really would. I would make it so the higher level of power wasn't accessible, and I would focus and develop the lower tier of the power a lot more, and I would keep the scope of the game much smaller. And the reason I would do that is because I found myself consistently just making new things and just kind of wedging them into the game, and then realizing I could make more stuff and wedging that in. And that just kind of continued. And I think consistently making new things and wedging them in is good, but I think that if we had a full operation here and I had a line editor that wasn't in China. David's in China. He's our line editor, but like it's hard to get consistent feedback because that's an enormous distance to communicate over. But if I had someone that I had closer communication with, and they were a little more, and they felt more confident in reining me in, which it's kind of difficult to do, but if they felt more confident in it, what they would have said was, okay, the scope of the project is this, I don't want you to go past it. So every time you're steadily working on it, we're getting a higher percentage completion. So it's going from 0% to 25%, 50, 80, 90, done. What I did instead with that steady work is it would be 20% done, and I'd get 5% more done and add another 15% on top of like goals. So I would continually fall behind, and that's not something that I think makes a really good production pipeline. So it's a trap to warn yourself about is think about the scope beforehand. But the steady work, especially if you have a little battle plan for what the full game is going to look like going in, very good strategy, because that way you don't overwork yourself, and you're consistently working. You have the ability, especially early on, to consistently work on stuff that's interesting to you, which helps you to remain creative and spontaneous, and that is reflected in your writing. Let's see. Last but not least, it's not D&D, and despite it not being D&D or OSR, you're saying fuck it and just doing your own thing. That's phenomenal. Thank you. I'm not the only person who had an idea for a game that didn't fit the mold really well of D&D. And I might actually work on some OSR stuff. I've been getting into the Dune saga, and there's something I want to do with the Mushroom Press where I do like if Dune was in the OSR, not like Black Sun, which does its own thing, but like for real, like a science fantasy kind of like Duneverse thing. I really want to do something like that. I've got a project called Balayari that I'm tinkering with as I read my way through the Dune saga. So you might see some OSR stuff out of me in the not too distant future. We'll see. Yeah, when it comes to it not being D&D, you will notice that it is very similar to D&D, in that you are wandering around in what is basically a post-apocalyptic wasteland filled with monsters and trying to do deeds and get treasure to get more powerful. In a very substantial way, that is D&D. It's a description of the game of Dungeons & Dragons. And I found that in designing my own game that I'm not really wandering too far from them. The really big departure and the selling point of my game, and actually a lot of games come to think of it, even later editions of D&D, is that the D&D combat is very, very simple. It's just a roll to resolve mechanism. You roll your attack, and if you hit them, you damage them. And the amount of hit points they have determines how close they are to being dead. That's a very simple system. And it's not entirely satisfying. Now, the way you make that satisfying in OSR play, of course, is that you describe those things, and there's a lot more going on that. There's a broader tactical situation that you're engaged in beyond the mere resolution of that given attack. But a lot of games, including mine, and any game that has martial arts in it, I feel, should distinguish itself strongly by emphasizing the nuance of that combat exchange. It's not just, I hit you with a stick and you drop. You've got to do something really remarkable with it, like Exalted 3rd Edition did, where it's giving you your own little, like, interesting, tactically engaging mini-game. So that is the one place I substantially diverge from D&D, and knowing where I substantially diverge from D&D and what I can essentially rob D&D for has really helped to focus the design. So, something to keep in mind. Let's see. I do like the term phenomenal, by the way. Excellent use of your vocabulary there, Ron. I know that writing the damn thing is just one part of getting the work from your head out to the physical world and into other people's hands. That's true. More than the writing, there's a step kind of before the writing. And I think it's called design. if I had to put a term to it, it would be design. And that's the stage where you have an idea in your head, a vision is what they call it in the business world. You have a vision in your head, and you try to translate it into something in the real world. And an artist would make a painting, a writer would make a book, you make a game mechanic or a game system, or even just a game thesis. That's a critical part of it. And I think that getting it out of your head is distinct from writing it, because writing it is taking that thing that you have that you know that works, that's in the real world, and then describing and teaching it to other people, and then showing them its value, so why it should be at their table. And that's the writing of it. So really there's two parts there. It's not just the writing, it's the initial forging of the thing in your head into the real world, and then the description of that and the teaching of that to people. So design and writing. That distinguishment is really good to keep in mind, because a lot of times you will have an undistinguished idea in your head and you're trying to write directly from that. My best advice to you, as a guy who has done this, is get that out of your head first. Just write it down on paper, like physically write it, don't type it out. Get yourself a notepad for like $1 and some throwaway pens and just write it down. And what I find is that it takes me 3 pages. I write the idea down, I think about it for a while, I write some more down for it, and then I flip over those 2 pages and I start completely from scratch, and I do it in one really elegant way on the third time. And that third thing is what I translate into typing. I'll have that right in front of me on the computer here, and I'll look at that and I'll reference that while I'm typing it out. And a lot of times it morphs substantially, going from that piece of paper, which I think is elegant, into the typed world. And that morph is fine too. It really is. But that's my exact process for that, and that's how I've been able to maintain steady work on it. So I strongly recommend that technique. I don't know if there's a word for it, but I know that Hemingway used a similar style with his writing, so I'm just going to call it the Hemingway technique in the short term. Let's see. What other challenges did you encounter along the way? Oh man. Okay, so this is the first part where you get to the questions, Ron, and I want to answer all your questions. So this is a big one. What other challenges did you encounter along the way? The biggest single challenge is being discouraged. And I don't know why, but any time that you share that you have an idea for a role-playing game online, everyone gets hyper conservative about it. There's no new ideas under the sun. I've heard that one. You are not a professional game designer. I've heard that one. Your ideas are shit, just general insult stuff. I've heard that one. On and on and on. There's just a huge wave of negativity for it, and it's very rare that you find someone who's excited about it enough, like you are, to play it with you and give you feedback and knock the ideas back and forth. But I'll tell you this. Your second challenge is going to be finding that person or persons who are willing to not only do that, but do it honestly, sometimes brutally honestly, because it's easy to vanish up your own ass in this job. It's very creative, and you can get a big ego about it, and you are dealing with your darlings. And again, as Hemingway says, you've got to kill your darlings. A lot of ideas that I had for this game made it in. Actually, a surprising amount were gold from concept. I'm very happy about that. A lot of them didn't survive. A lot of them, and a lot of the I actually learned that lesson for a lot of the previous games that I tried to design that I was mentioning before. Like that idea about having the resolution system where you could ensure success, but you would die if you failed, or would have otherwise failed. Whenever we actually played that out, what we found was people were dying trying to talk to people, or dying trying to break open a door with an axe. Stuff that you should never put your life on the line for. The chance of success was just too low, and the consequences of success plus death were too high. So that it wound up not really making, and like it wasn't clear where specifically you would apply that. So there was a lot of questions that were left up in the air. And so the idea, as cool as it was, I couldn't figure out a way to manifest it. So ultimately it was just an interesting idea. And it was really the death knell of that game. I basically had to design a completely different game system for that based on a different idea. And I've got a little more experience now. I think I could actually make that original idea work again if I went back and revisited it. But the important lesson there was that, like, the idea itself had to die. It could not function. I couldn't make it function as a game. And that was one of the hardest things I had to deal with as a game designer ever. Oh, excuse me. Still to this day, I find it heartbreaking if I have to delve too deeply into a system I've designed to change something that's just not working. Um, for example, in Lone Wolf Fist, I've already rewritten the agility rules twice, and I'm gonna rewrite them again. That's some agonizing work to have to do because I've already completely designed them and they technically functioned each time, but they didn't do what they were supposed to do each time. And after playtesting and having designed it several times, I've got to kill it, go back to first principles, and painstakingly build it up again. And it has to be done if it's going to be done right. So, um, discouragement is one of the biggest things I dealt with along the way. Another thing is overcommitting myself to things, and the problem of scope. There's a lot of bad advice floating around online about how you design an RPG. Don't take any of it at all. Talk to people like me. Talk to people like me. Talk to people like Justin Alexander, Alexander Macris, like even people that you wouldn't normally talk to. Just try to approach them like you're approaching me, and just be polite. And when it comes to networking, I found the best thing is just to be really genuine with people. Like I'm doing right now. This is just how I'd talk to someone I encountered on the street basically. Like I don't have a lot of pretense. There's not a lot of formality to this. Because at the end of the day, we're all pretty similar. We're all just a bunch of folks rolling dice and playing elf games. Keeping humble about it and being genuine is consistently worked, and that's worked with artists, that's worked with fellow designers, that's worked with aspiring writers, that's worked with editors, that's worked with everybody. Like consistently, that's the strategy that works. Sending an email like you did, just like that, you were polite and respectful, you're a good communicator, you formatted your email in a way that was very readable. That's it. It's really basic like communication stuff. You seem to have nailed that, so no worries about that part. But yeah, talk to people directly. Don't solicit forums for advice at all. I've gotten some good advice from forums, but the forum that consistently gave the best advice was almost certainly the traditional games forum on 4chan, which is about 75 to 80%, from what I can tell, like incels and weirdos, and the remaining 20% are awesome people, and I really like them. They've got good feedback. They're smart. A lot of them are very talented. I've sourced a lot of talent from TG, which if it ever to listen to the advice of people who talk about TG, it's like avoid it entirely. But like really, if I make a post on TG and I consistently just am genuine and upbeat about it and honest, another thing is being very honest and self-critical, then I see a big spike in downloads of my game. I see a lot more chatter about it online. I see it popping up in places I didn't put it. You gotta go where people are free to really be themselves. Another site that does that really well is the RPG site, which again is looked at by a lot of forums as a cesspool of like far right, alt right ideology, and that does happen sometimes on the RPG site. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've seen some odious posts there, but they're usually moderated really quickly. And the people that stick around on the RPG site, even though they can be a little on the mean side, and I'm one of them. They give good advice and they don't suffer fools. And that's actually really useful, especially when you're designing a game. A site that doesn't do it very well is RPG.net, which is over moderated to the point where you can get thrown out of the forums for just not knowing what the particular political leanings of the moderators are, and saying something that is in every other scenario that I've ever encountered in my entire life totally innocuous. You can get banned or like attacked at RPGNet, and it's a kind of a hostile environment to go to. So, and I don't want to speak ill of them because I've advertised with them, and I have had a lot of fans that come from from RPGNet. Including some patrons. So it's not like it's just a toxic cesspool of groupthink and hyper moderation, but it certainly leans that way, and it can really, if you get baited into getting upset or just taking a stand on a principle that doesn't exactly agree with a moderator's idea of how it should work, you can find yourself banned. You can find yourself consistently publicly attacked. It got to the point with Alexander Macros, as a matter of fact, that he basically had to tell them, like, hey, look, you need your moderator staff to stop personally attacking me, or we're going to have to make this a legal scenario. And their response to that wasn't to censor the moderator. Their response to that was to ban any discussion of him or his game line on their forum. That's that's not an environment that is conducive to game designing. It's not an environment that's conducive to promoting even. So the real agony of RPG.net for me personally is that I don't really disagree with the broader ideas of it. Like, I'm a fairly liberal-leaning fellow. Like, I wouldn't really call myself a Democrat, but I certainly believe that people should be treated with respect, and I believe very strongly that that ethnicity shouldn't be something that divides us. It should be something that unites us. I myself am several ethnicities. I present white, is what they say in my far left-leaning circles. But like, I'm all kinds of stuff. I'm Native and a bunch of other things. I have a deep respect for women, and I think they have all the capabilities men have. I mean, like, all the really, like, the liberal talking points. I'm like, yeah, okay, I generally agree with that notion. So like, it's weird to me to wind up being on the wrong side of conversations when it comes to liberal stuff, because usually all my more conservative friends, they're the ones who are making fun of me for that. And when I go to a place like RPGNet, they are so, I don't even want to call them far left. They're like something entirely different. And if you can, like, it's always a balancing act going to that forum. So we actually, one of the mini challenges we encountered as a group was we went there to post about our game a long time ago, and we got kind of ambushed by this talking point where we were supporting a nuclear family, and that was making LGBTQ representation like it was vanishing it, which is a weird talking point because I'm bi, so I'm in the LGBTQ community. And our game doesn't do that. It's a crazy, like, right, I was talking about All Above Heaven and that one, which is a crazy far future game where there aren't even children in certain cases of society because they just perfectly clone themselves when their bodies wear out. Like, so it has nothing to do with that, and like, one of our main four characters in that is, I mean, like, not what we'd consider to be trans nowadays, because, like, we have, like, a more healthy outlook on that nowadays in our real world, but it's kind of like a far future stand-in for a person that's going through those same struggles. So, like, it was a weird take, and we found ourselves on the receiving end of a lot of hostility that we eventually had to just kind of like hyper explain ourselves to this point. We were like, no, none of that. Why are you even attacking us? And I think the fact is that there are bad actors on those forums. Now, it's not the only forum where there's bad actors, but it's one of the only forums that consistently has a lot of credibility where there's bad actors, and they know they can do damage to your reputation there, and that damage lasts. So that's a challenge. And nowadays, when you're promoting on the internet, that's not the only place that does that. Like, a lot of sites will do that. So definite challenge when you come to promoting is and a thing I found that gets around that mostly is just focus on the game. My game is clearly about the thing it's about. Kung Fu in the post-apocalypse. All the art is like people fighting people with magical Kung Fu fists, or like crazy post-apocalyptic martial artists, or like monsters or exploding tanks or post-apocalyptic landscapes. There's nothing currently hot-button political in any of that, really. Like, you can dig and probably find some kind of, like, really deeply buried, largely manufactured political talking point if you really want to. But I find that the people that go that far don't have a ton of credibility in the wider world, even the internet, so I wouldn't worry about them too much. But it's something that's... I've had a lot of sleepless nights worrying about how people take my game. Okay. There were more challenges. I'm going to stop it there for the challenges questions. You got more questions I want to get to. What kind of support network do you have to help your labors come to life? Right now, the best I've been able to do as far as consistently working on it is being basically stable and happy in my life. I have a job. My bills and needs are getting met. I don't have any medical problems. I don't have anything really eating all of my time. So I have enough free time to dedicate to a hobby, and I have a job, and all my needs are met. So that is a minimum support network for just having the technical capability of having the free time and the security to make a game, to commit to making a project. In addition to that, I find that having your gaming buddies enthused about what you're doing really helps. Having people that you game with who are willing to playtest with you is extremely useful. I have additionally had a lot of support in the Discord. I started my own Discord for this, and the people that have populated it are just the most wonderful people. Really, they're supportive, they're intelligent, they consistently give feedback and emotional support, and a lot of times you'll feel just at least I have felt completely just despaired, utterly defeated in this project, and I'll talk to someone about it, and I'll be able to share the difficulties I'm going through, and they'll genuinely give me like measured, intelligent, and thoughtful feedback, and they'll consider my feelings in it. And I think those are the two main elements: is just being a more or less stable and healthy person, and having friends and well-wishers who are willing to support you in your endeavor. So those would be the two things I'd recommend. Let's see. What kind of networking was involved, and how did you get that handled? Well, I've already talked to you about what you're doing right now being just basically ideal networking. I have used private messaging on forums if I didn't have someone's email to get in touch with them, and that's worked on a few occasions. That works consistently on most forums, and I've done that both on RPGNet and on the RPG site, and in both cases, I got very candid, very helpful feedback from people. Actually, one of the moderators at RPGNet, Stephen Leah Shepard, gave me some very helpful advice and feedback, and got me in touch with the editor of Legends of the Wulin back when I was having some difficulties with that, and that was going above and beyond the pale in my estimation. So shout out to, he has a shout out, a special thanks in my book, as well as that editor has a shout out as well. Excuse me. The podcast I do with Brendan Davis began because I knew him from Wandering Heroes of Ogregate, and I was getting really nervous. I was about a year before I released Act 1, I was really nervous about it, and I wanted to get some feedback on it from someone who had released something before. So I just private messaged him on the RPG site, and he immediately was very enthusiastic and helpful and supportive, and invited me to do a podcast with him, and we have had the greatest friendship blossom from that. Like, I rarely have friends like him, and it's really wonderful to have one. But the same thing with the RPG Pundit, who has been labeled some awful things, including the final boss of internet shitlords. But really, having spoken with him and dealt with him professionally, because I advertised on the RPG site, and I spoke with him a few times about my game on the site, and have some threads on his site about it. He's just the nicest guy you'd ever want to talk to. He's polite and respectful. He's very forthright, and he's a straight shooter. And the thing is, like, he lives his life out loud, and you can see everything he does. Like, if he has a thought, he's gonna blog about it, tweet about it. There's gonna be a podcast about it. So it's not like he has any secrets. He plays with his hand on the table, and so if there's anything really odious about him that you dislike, it's right there. He's not hiding it from you. And even if you don't like him, even if you do find him odious, the fact that he does that is such a courtesy, because you'll know it, and you could just not deal with him. You don't have to. He doesn't go into places he's not wanted to make a ruckus. He made his own little corner of the internet, and he made it the way he wanted. And, like, I don't agree with him politically on a lot of stuff. Like, I really don't. At the same time, though, I respect the guy, and I really do enjoy working with him. Whenever I get a print version of Act 1, I'm going to send it to him. I'm eager to learn his feedback. And that's another thing about doing networking, is you really do need to treat people with respect. Even if you don't agree with them, even if they have a bad reputation, even if whatever. The RPG industry, such as it is such a sewing circle of gossip and backbiting. We're a bunch of old women. We are. And if you can rise above that, and have enough self-respect to treat other people as you want to be treated consistently, even when they're mean to you, even if they're rude to you, even if they say something you don't want to hear, if you just consistently give them respect and are consistently honest with them, you'll get the best results, or at least I have gotten the best results from that. So Let's see. What was your other question? How are you handling getting your game to fruition with your life outside of game design and the hobby? In other words, how do you game designer? Lol. All right. Let's see. I treat it almost like a religious duty. With this game, I went into college whenever I started designing it. I'd been in college for a little bit before that, but this is one of the first time I really did it, and I considered it like I did not give myself the option of failure with college. I was like, I'm going to get everything done on time and as well as I can, and I'm going to constantly work myself to the bone to get those A's. And I've gotten A's in college. I've worked my tuchus off and gotten a straight A's so far. That might be slipping this semester. This is the last little hurrah before my bachelor's degree, so I've got some really challenging classes. But I did not give myself failure as an option with college at all. It's like, I'm going to succeed or die, and I'm not going to die, so I'm going to succeed. That's going to happen. I really looked at this game in the same way. I was passionate about it. I wanted it to happen. And a thing I did was I committed a lot, like hundreds of dollars of money to cover art really early in it, which I don't suggest doing, but I also sort of kind of do. Because what that did was, and Parliament I did this too, Parliament of Crocodiles I did this too, I have this investment that I cannot get a return from. I can't sell that art for anywhere near what I paid for it to get it created. And that art is something that the only way I'm going to see a return on that is completing this game, getting it all the way out, and having it be a success. That's it. That's the only way I can do it. So if you look at it like that, if you make that overcommitment like I did, and you have that attitude where you will not give yourself the opportunity for failure, you wind up kind of treating it like a second job, where you're like, look, I'm tired, I'm hungover, I'm sick, but I have to get to work today. I don't have any more time off. That attitude has been the thing that has drugged this project forward when nothing else in the universe could. Because otherwise, it's really subject to your mood, and it's subject to how you feel that day, whether or not you have any creative energy or anything like that. But sometimes just lacking sleep and just pounding pot after pot of coffee, I've been like, no, I'm going to get the words on the screen and on my blog or in this document tonight. This is my deadline. I'm doing it now. That has consistently been something, that attitude has been something that's been able to drag this project forward. Now, I don't know that I recommend working like that, but I can recommend it from the perspective of it actually working. So, that's how you get the writing done, at least. Let me see. I'm trying to reach out to as many game designers as I can. You're definitely one that I've been meaning to talk to about this, because I would also like to share my labors of love with others as you're doing. Well, that's admirable, Ron. If you could share your perspective on this, it would mean a great deal to me. Hope to hear from you soon, and keep on keeping on. I will. Lone Wolf Fist is going to kick ass, and I'm definitely going to support it on Kickstarter. Well, thank you. You've actually given me a pretty good amount of money for this so far, so I believe your name is in the playtest document. It's going to be in the final product as well as a backer. So I'm really happy to hear that you're gonna help me kickstart it, and I hope that you'll really enjoy it when it gets to you, and it'll grace your table more than once. I hope that some of this 40 minutes worth of ranting has been insightful or helpful, or at least entertaining. I'm actually posting this up pretty much for everybody to see, because I don't do things clandestinely, not very well. I'm not a good liar. And my experience with this hopefully has given anyone who wants to try to do something like this, where they're going all the way through making a game, including all the art and all of that, a little bit of insight. Final parting advice for this is when it comes to this stuff, I have yet to see a profit from it. Like I said, I put a lot of money into the cover art, which was a big sink, but really just, like, even if you look at the amount of unpaid labor in not only the design and writing, but the editing, the rewriting, the tech editing, the self-promotion, all that stuff, that's work, you know? That's all effort. And it was that was done instead of gaming, that was done instead of another job I could have done that would have made me money. Excuse me. And I loved it, and I didn't always enjoy doing it, but I always enjoyed that I have done it. And I'm glad that I did the work. But I would not get into this industry with the idea that you're going to be financially successful in it. I think that if you want to make something that is financially profitable, you should keep your scope extremely small and keep your production pipeline fast and efficient. And when I'm talking about production pipeline, what I mean is you need to have like a little chart, which is idea, design, writing, testing, rewriting, and then you need to have probably like I use Microsoft Publisher. But you need something to do layout and then art, and then you need a platform to publish it. So that's the whole production pipeline of making an RPG product. And I want you to write that down, and I want you to have a plan for each step of it. And whenever you have that plan, a thing I want you to do, and this is something I learned in management science, by the way, so this cost me $70,000 to learn, so listen the fuck up. I want you to estimate how much time you think each one of those things and what dollar cost you're going to attach to each one of those things. And I would pay yourself probably 4 cents a word. So owe that to yourself whenever you write. And do all of that. The first thing you should do in this is make something really small. OSR is kind of perfect for this, where like you make a dungeon or something. And do all those steps. And then get it out there and promote it. Twitter account, Facebook, forum post, TG is a good place. Any place you can think of where they talk about games, where you can self-promote. Talk to individuals. Go to the hype threads. Make threads that you can get away with. Like, don't self-promote in a main forum, like just shameless promotion. You get a conversation going about how you're making this game and what your goals are. And whenever people get interested, talk to them genuinely about it and answer their questions. That's what I do. But promote it. And after a time frame of between like 4 and 6 months, which is a quarter to half the year, I want you to look at the amount you make, whatever you price it as, and I would suggest pricing it relatively low, somewhere in the $3.99, $4.99 range if you could. I think pay what you want might have been a little bit generous on my part, if I'm going to be totally honest. But price it in the lower range so you're price competitive. And if considering your writing and the time you spent doing all that layout and all of that, and the amount you spent for art, whatever you spent, and if you put the art in it yourself, that's fine. Just as long as it looks like you want it to look. That's the basic thing. If after that 6-month time frame you have broken even or made a profit, then you now have all of the skills that I have in making an RPG. And having all of those skill sets, being able to be confident enough in yourself that you can get that whole production pipeline done. No, just a second, guys. Take care.